What's good, everyone? Today is the 23rd of January, 2024, and in today's video, we'll be discussing the death of Dexter King, the youngest son of famous civil rights activist Martin Luther King. Dexter has died at the age of 62, and as we always do on this channel, we're going to use the language of Gematria, the occulted number lettering system that sits underneath our alphabetic order, in order to understand more about this death. When you use this language of Gematria and compare it to dates on the calendar, we find that something very strange in this world is going on. And certainly, this is present in the death of Dexter King as well. Now, if you search my channel, you'll actually find a few videos on the Martin Luther King story in the past. Now, in 2020, we had the famous death of George Floyd. And down in the description below, you'll find a few videos I've done on George Floyd's death and how it was basically a numeric recreation of the MLK assassination. And perhaps the best example, again, these videos are linked below, so I won't get too far into this, but Derek Chauvin, the officer who killed George Floyd, was 44 years and 68 days old on the date of that incident. And that reflects the date that Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, 4/4 of 68. So we're going to talk about how the death of Dexter King is numerically linked to the assassination of his father, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and also the Eclipse code, as we are in a significant period of time here in the United States between the two great American total solar eclipses, which create a cross over the U.S., and in April we'll have the second of these two events. Another interesting thing we'll look at is the television series Dexter, which is a show about a lot of death. And, of course, this popped to mind when I saw the name Dexter in the news. And we're actually going to start there. If you measure from the start of the Showtime series Dexter, which shares a name with the fallen king from this week, October 21st of 2006 to the death of Dexter King on January 22nd, notice how we get exactly 903 weeks. Now, the number 93, as this represents in numerology with the 0 ignored, has always been significant to Martin Luther King Jr. and the story of his death. In fact, the actor who played Dexter, Michael C. Hall, this man was born on a date with primary numerology of 93, 2 plus 1 plus 19 plus 71. And the name Michael also stands out because Martin Luther King's birth name was actually Michael King. Using a cipher called Latin Gematria, which I consider to be the most significant cipher in this language. This is a method based on the ancient Latin alphabetic order, which uses a numerical structure similar to Greek and Hebrew, isopsephy and Gematria. And in this method, the full name Dexter Scott King has a value of 903, the exact number of weeks he died after the show Dexter's premiere. Using the standard reduction or Pythagorean forms of Gematria, these ciphers reduce every double-digit number to a single digit before adding it to the equation. Notice how the name Martin Luther King Jr. equals 93. The last name King also with 93 Gematria, but so does the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, which sums to 93. And of course, Minneapolis, Minnesota is where George Floyd was killed by police back in May of 2020. Now, the number 93 is also a very biblical number. Most Christians believe that Jesus was crucified on April 3rd, which is the 93rd day of the year. And in multiple Gematria ciphers, April 3rd sums to 903 and 930. The crucifixion is said to have occurred between the 3rd hour and the 9th hour which translates to 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. on our current clocks. Think about the hands on the cross pointing to 9 and 3. God's Son, Nazareth, and Crucifix, all with 93 Gematria. A lot like Christianity 930 in Sumerian, which happens to be the age that Adam, the first man, ever lived. So this also a significant number to Minnesota. Minneapolis, Minnesota sums to 93 in reduction, and all 4 of the city's major sports teams all also sum to 93. The governor of Minnesota with 93 birth numerology, and notice how the 93rd meridian on the globe cuts right near the city of Minneapolis. Now, during the crucifixion of Jesus, it's believed that darkness fell over the sky. This is told in 3 of the 4 Gospels. And this darkness during the sky is very similar to an eclipse. In fact, a 1961 film about the crucifixion was actually filmed during a total solar eclipse. And this brings us to the 2 great American eclipses here over the United States. Well, if you measure from the first eclipse, August 21st of 2017, to his death, you get exactly 77 months. News of his death yesterday was 77 days before the second great American total solar eclipse. And using the S exception of Gematria, the name Dexter Scott King sums to 77. The S exception, for the record, is identical to reduction Gematria, but S, the 19th letter, only reduced once. 1 plus 9 is 10. And the last name King, of course, points us to the true King, Christ, whose name is 77 in ordinal. Dexter passed away in Malibu, California, which intriguingly has matching Gematria with Jesus Christ in multiple base methods. Now, one thing that's worth pointing out is that there's actually some debate on the date that Dexter died. It's said that he died in his sleep, and some outlets were initially reporting January 21st as the date he died. I don't know if anyone really knows, but we're going to talk about how both of these dates are very significant, particularly to the 666 and Skull and Bones code that we'll look at the end of this video. January 21st had numerology of 66, while January 22nd had numerology of 67. Well, notice how the name King sums to 66 in Latin, and also 67 in multiple methods. January 22nd, also the 22nd day of the year, and the name King summing to 22 in reverse reduction. On the date of his death, Dexter King was 23,002 days old. Now that's pretty interesting because in a cipher called Capitals Mixed, which is the standard alphabetic order but with capital letters interspersed with the small ones, the name Dexter King sums to 232. Using the reverse alphabetic order, his father's name, Martin Luther King, also 232. And if you look at Martin's age, or how old he would have been when his son Dexter died, notice how he turned 1,140 months old, just 1 week before his son's death. Well, the number 114 is the reverse reduction sum of Martin Luther King Jr. MLK, with all capital letters, sums to 114. This is also the gematria of the civil rights movement, which MLK was identified with. Minneapolis, Minnesota in reverse, also 114. And when George Floyd died in Minneapolis, it was actually 114 days after the birthday of Michael C. Hall. Again, the actor who played Dexter on the series. In the alphabetic order, the word prostate sums to 114. And indeed, it was prostate cancer which is said to have claimed the life of Dexter. In reduction, the name Dexter Scott King has matching gematria with prostate cancer. This also includes the number 85, and this is the Gematria of Christ in reverse, 85. So there's certainly a strong riddle here with the number 666. But before I get there, I just want to touch on a couple of more strong alignments. And this points to the number that's in the headline of this story, 62. Dexter died 293 days after April 4th, which is the date his father was killed. Dexter also died 293 days before November 10th, which was the birthday of Martin Luther, the man that Michael King Jr. changed his name to model himself after. Well, the number 293 is a prime number, divisible only by 1 and itself. And here we see it's the 62nd prime. The name Dexter sums to 62 with Fibonacci numbers. In ordinal, Floyd equals 62, a number of sacrifice. If Dexter King actually died on January 21st, he would have been 23,001 days old. Now, right away, there's a connection here, because the number 231 is the 21st triangular number. If you add every number 1 through 21, you get a sum of 231. And January 21st, of course, the 21st day on the calendar. Well, in the reverse alphabetic order, Michael King Jr. equals 231. This is a number shared with George Perry Floyd, whose name also equals 231. Assuming he actually died on the 22nd, we see that Dexter King was also a span of 23,003 days old. Now, in numerology, this represents the number 233. That's the 51st prime number, and check out George Floyd's age on that same date, January 22nd. 50 years, 100 days, representing 51. Dexter also died exactly 191 weeks after George Floyd. That's the 43rd prime number. Assassination equals 191 and 43, but notice how George Floyd also has that 43. 43, an important number to the code of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ equals 43. In Latin, Jesus equals 985. And if you measure from the premiere of Dexter back in 2006 to the date of George Floyd's death, you get 4,985 days. Now, I would not have mentioned that alignment. However, Michael C. Hall, who plays Dexter, is 986 days older than George Floyd. So definitely intriguing alignments here connecting these men, but what really brings this all together is the 666 and skull and bones code. Now, of course, these two eclipses creating a cross over the United States, much like the bones under the skull creating a cross. And if you've been following this channel at all over the past year, you know that this has been all about skull and bones lately. Yale University, home of Order 322, skull and crossbones equals 223. The school turned 322 years old in 2023. So this date, October 9th, Yale's anniversary, has been very important all year. First, we start with Dexter King's birth numerology, as Dexter was born on a date with primary numerology of 111. Now, this number is actually connected to 666 very strongly. Consider how English Sumerian Gematria, which multiplies the alphabetic order by 6. So, for instance, everything that sums to 111 in ordinal is also going to be 666 in Sumerian. And this goes for every phrase. So we have this guy with 111 birth numerology. And consider how the digit 1 looks very similar to the Hebrew letter Vav which is worth 6 in Gematria. So 111 in Hebrew could be that 666. Well, when George Floyd died in the year 2020, Dexter King was 21,666 days old. He was also 117 days after his birthday. And in the alphabetic order, Dexter King sums to 117. Dexter was also born under Brown lunation number 471. And this is a number I commonly talk about because 666 and Revelation both equal 471 in Satanic Gematria, which is a number completely constructed around the number 666. Satanic Gematria 666 in this cipher. Also notice this cipher ends in 61, which is the year that Dexter King was born. Revelation was even written by John of Patmos, and Patmos equals 471 in Standard Gematria, the cipher which uses the English alphabetic order, very similar to Latin. When you write the number 666 like this, you get this value of 201. And this is the ordinal gematria of the name George Perry Floyd, also yielding a 201 in the alphabetic order. Now, February 1st is the date that we write 201 on the calendar. And Michael C. Hall was actually born on this date, February 1st. So I bring this up because on February 1st, this year, this is actually a significant date to the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement ended on August 1st of 1968 following the Civil Rights Act of 1968. And if you measure from that date to February 1st next week, notice how it'll be exactly 666 months after the end of the civil rights movement that MLK was associated with. That movement strived to guarantee equal rights to every citizen. And you have to appreciate how the name citizen sums to 666 in Latin. And in English Standard, civil rights movement equals 1665. So, of course, 1 plus 665 is 666. In reduction gematria, 666 sums to 95. And this is actually a pretty significant fact because 95 weeks on the calendar is a span of 666 days. So if we look at a 666-day span here, when we convert this to weeks, we find that 95 weeks is also a span of 666 days. The civil rights movement began on a date with primary numerology of 95. Martin Luther King was assassinated on another date with primary numerology of 95, which was also the 95th day of a leap year. His assassination occurred 95 sidereal months after Dexter King was born. A sidereal month, for the record, measures a lunar orbit in relation to the stars. It's a little bit shorter than a lunar phase. Now, Dexter King has died exactly 1 week after his father's 95th birthday. Martin Luther King was assassinated allegedly by a man named James Earl Ray. It's also been 95 years since James Earl Ray was born. But if you measure from the death of James Earl Ray, which was on April 23rd, Dexter died 275 days after April 23rd. And 275 is the ordinal gematria of 666. But we're not done. The number 666 is the 36th triangular number and comprised of 3 sixes. Well, in ordinal, MLK equals 36. And MLK's youngest son died exactly 3,636 weeks after the civil rights movement began. The name Martin Luther, one of the real OGs when it came to protesting. Martin Luther's name sums to the 122nd prime number, pointing us back to the date that Dexter King died, January 22nd, or 122. Dexter King was 120 months and 2 days older than Michael C. Hall, who played Dexter on television. The civil rights movement started 122 days after Martin Luther King's birthday. And with the S exception, in Gematria, 666 equals 122. Now, his death on January 22nd was also 122 days after the anniversary of Dexter's series finale on September 22nd. Now, if he died on the 21st, that was 121 days after that date. And think about that date, January 21st, 21/1, as most of the world writes it. Well, that's the reverse gematria of 666, 211. That is also the reverse gematria of Dexter Scott King, 211. Now, in Latin gematria, 666 sums to 2,038. And would you believe, Dexter died 20,380 days after his father. In fact, Dexter would have been 23,080 days old for the second Great American Eclipse that happens in April. Next, we're going to look at how this all ties into the skull and bones riddle. Earlier, I pointed out how Yale turned 322 years old on October 9th of 2023. Well, if you measure from that date, October 9th, back to the assassination of MLK Jr., you get a span of 666 months and 6 days. These two Great American total solar eclipses are separated on the calendar by 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days. Notice how the Brotherhood of Death, which is the Skull and Bones Society's nickname, has matching Latin gematria with number of the beast, 724. 666, of course, the number of the beast in the Bible. Martin Luther King was assassinated 724 weeks after the civil rights movement started. That's also exactly a span of 5,072 days. And in that same Latin cipher, skull and bones equals 572. Dexter King died 105 days after Skull and Bones and Yale's anniversary. Well, 105 is the reduction value of 666. 105 in reduction. The civil rights movement started exactly 1,322 weeks after Martin Luther King Jr. was born. And if you look at how old Martin Luther King would have been for Yale's special anniversary last year, he would have been exactly 34,600 days old. Now that stands out because these two eclipses are exactly 346 weeks apart on the calendar. One more thing is that if you include the end date, Dexter King died 106 days after Yale's 322nd anniversary in 2023. And that's important because the number 223 equals 106. And of course, so does 322. 106 as well. Now, before I end this video, I just want to point out some related numerology from another post I made over the weekend. Because we saw this same connection, 2,830 days. So let me quick explain this. Earlier, which post was it here? It's going to be one of these 3 posts I made on George Floyd. Oh, I remember what it was. Excuse me, guys, while I pull up a post from August. Because I talked about George Floyd in August of 2023. In regards to the death of Sandra Bullock's partner. And I guess that's kind of interesting because on this channel, just last week, I talked about, if I can find my channel here, I talked about Sandra Bullock in this super stream. Or was it? Yeah, it might have been this video about Jordan Love, because I talked about the death of Jordan Miller. And Jordan Miller was the brother of Jason Patric, who starred alongside Sandra Bullock in the Speed films. Well, anyway, what I wanted to point out about this is that George Floyd died exactly 93 months after Neil Alden Armstrong. And Brian Randall died exactly 93 years after Armstrong was born. And we talked about 93 to top this video off. Sandra Bullock, Brian Randall, 93. The sun is an average of 93 million miles from Earth. But this 93 months, this is also 2,830 days. And the connection here is kind of obvious. When George Floyd died, he was strong-armed and kneeled on. And this guy's name is Neil Armstrong. Well, this 2,830, this represents the gematria of the moon. The moon equals 283. 666 equals 2,083. Neil Armstrong, the first man to ever allegedly walk on the moon. Well, one of my last videos was about the Packers and 49ers game in San Francisco, and that game was marred by a ton of rain. It was like some of the most rain you'll ever see during a football game. And this reminded me of Prince, who performed the song Purple Rain under a rainstorm in Miami for Super Bowl 41. Now, this is something else that connects to more recent work, I suppose, because late last year I talked about the death of Matt Ulrich, who was a champion of Super Bowl 41, the game that Prince played during, and then he would go on to die at age 41. So I explained how this was all connected to Prince. Well, look how old Prince would have been for Saturday night's game between the Packers and 49ers. 65 years, 227 days for a game on a date with 65 numerology. Well, the name Prince equals 65 and 227. Purple Rain equals 58. And, of course, it's Super Bowl 58 that caps off this NFL season. Prince was born in the year 58 and also died at the age of 58. Prince was born on June 7th, or the date 6-7. And check out the score at halftime. Packers 6, Niners 7. Purple Rain has matching gematria with Skull and Bones with the ampersand. And that's kind of important because Super Bowl 41 is where he performed, and that's the 13th prime number. Purple Rain and Skull and Bones, both 130. This game was played 103 days after Yale's anniversary. Well, in Latin gematria, Skull and Crossbones equals 885, And this game was played exactly 885 weeks after Prince died. So as I explained in my last video, that game was all a riddle connected to the number 666 with NASA and the moon landing. And again, it was 2,830 days, or exactly 93 months after Prince died. It was also 275 days after the anniversary of Prince's death. Both Prince and Skull and Crossbones have Gematria of 275, just like 666. In Sumerian, 666 equals 1650. And the Packers-Niners game was exactly 16 years and 50 weeks after Prince performed at the Super Bowl. The name Prince equals 197 in Latin. Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon, was exactly 1,097 sidereal months old when he died. 197 is the 45th prime number. Notice how moon equals 197 and the moon equals 45. This game ended with a total of 45 points. Remember, the Packers' last Super Bowl was Super Bowl 45. But also notice this score of 21-24. In Sumerian Gematria, Yale University Skull and Bones equals 21-24. So, maybe I got a little sidetracked at the end of this, but, I mean, what else would you expect on this channel? But it's just strange that I just pointed out this 2,830 days, right? And we had this 2,830-day sync with George Floyd, who was a topic of this story. So, definitely connections here with the moon landing and Neil Armstrong and all that. If you want to find more about this, just check any one of my recent videos. Ever since this one right here, I've been talking almost exclusively about NASA and all these moon landing missions that various nations have been doing over the past several months. India, the United States, now Japan landing a craft on the moon. That's really been what it's all about lately, so check those out. Also, check the links down in the description if you want to find more information, or, of course, if you'd like to help support the work and keep everything online. All right, guys, that'll do it for this one. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to y'all next time. See ya!